What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 6 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We'll do our best to answer them all, but with that being said, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, I want to highlight the sponsor of today's video, OddsJam. OddsJam continues to be the place that I use for all of my sports betting research, from the NFL, NBA, MLB, to daily fantasy and everything in between. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you firsthand all the amazing tools OddsJam has to offer. Starting with their positive EV tool, which identifies situations where a single sportsbook has mispriced their line compared to the rest of the market. They're basically willing to pay a lot more so that you bet with them compared to the other sportsbook. At the end of the day, you're getting the best odds, essentially a mathematical edge and guaranteed money in the long run. But also available is OddsJam's arbitrage tool, which shows situations where the market is so mispriced that you can bet on both sides and guarantee a risk-free return. OddsJam's calculators show you exactly how much you have to bet on the over and under and what the respective guaranteed risk-free return would be. There's also OddsJam's Sportsbook tool, which consolidates all available market info, over 200 sportsbooks, and provides updates in real time and allows you to see line movement. But my personal favorite is their Fantasy Optimizer tool, which is great for those using PrizePicks, Underdogs, or other daily fantasy sites, as you get to see discrepancies between all of these sportsbooks. Imagine, PrizePicks has a Patrick Mahomes line at 200.5 passing yards, and all other books like FanDuel and Underdog have this line at 230 passing yards. Well, getting the over 200.5 on PrizePicks would be an absolute steal. Guess what? OddsJam does that for you. And the good news is, if you sign up today and use our code PIGSKIN, check the link and promo code in the description of this video, you will get 25% off your first month. OddsJam also has a 7-day free trial, so you get to try before you buy. So don't waste any more time and sign up for OddsJam using our code PIGSKIN today. And we kick off Week 6 on Thursday with the Broncos at the Chiefs. And here, a little bit different than maybe the running back matchup. From the wide receiver side of things, I would really only look at the Denver Broncos. I think this is going to be a game where they're not going to be able to establish the run. And versus a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to have to air out the football. The top two guys I'm looking at are Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. I will admit Courtland Sutton is the riskier of the two options. But when we play the matchups here, he is the number 2 wide receiver on that team. So I would go ahead and fire him up, maybe a little bit in the boom or bust low-end wide receiver 2 category. But when things line up, like I believe they will here, versus a Chiefs team that you need to air it out against in order to have a chance to win, especially when the running attack isn't where it needs to be, Sutton should be a viable option, and then Jerry Jeudy is the preferred guy. I'm sitting Marvin Mims, just not right now really all that fantasy viable. And then for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm sitting all Kansas City wide receivers. This shouldn't really be a shock to anybody. I've been saying this since the season started. There's just not one primary guy for the Kansas City Chiefs, the wide receiver position, that constitutes a start every single week. It's going to be Travis Kelce. It's going to be Pacheco at the running back position. And then Patrick Mahomes is going to spread out the football to everyone, but nobody uber targeted. So for that reason, none of these wide receivers are really all that fantasy friendly. Then Ravens at the Titans. There's only 2 names here that I want to focus on. Obviously, there's more wide receivers to know. For the Ravens, you've got Zay Flowers, and then for the Titans, you've got DeAndre Hopkins. So let's start with the Ravens. I think that this is going to be a game where they're going to err on the side of throwing the ball. The Titans, for the majority of the season, have been good against the run, with a couple of exceptions here and there, if you look at last week as well. But to me, the Ravens are going to spread out the ball to Mark Andrews and then to Zay Flowers. Even though he's a rookie, Flowers has proven to be the most consistent guy, the most available guy for the Ravens. Odell Beckham has been banged up continuously. Rashad Bateman just hasn't been consistent. And afterwards, there is a huge drop-off. So I think Zay Flowers will see a good amount of targets this week. I prefer him in PPR matchups. And the same situation with DeAndre Hopkins. I don't see the Titans having a lot of success on the ground here. I think that, in a lot of games, they're going to have to change their game script of just running Derrick Henry on the ground, which has been very inefficient so far this season, to airing out the football. Hopkins is going to be the main guy here. Should get a lot of targets. Again, both Flowers and Hopkins more PPR plays. I think Hopkins has the higher upside just because, he's more experienced. He's more established, more consistent. But still, with that being the case, I think they're both kind of in that wide receiver 2 category. Then Panthers at the Dolphins. For the Panthers, there's only one name. It will continue to be Adam Thielen. Nobody else here really matters all too much, whether it is, Terrace Marshall, whether it's Jonathan Mingo, Shark. No, all those guys are very, very inconsistent. It's just Adam Thielen. In PPR formats, he has been very, very solid. Low-end wide receiver 1. And I think it can continue. For the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I love the upside for Tyreek Hill. He's been great all season long. Jalen Waddle, also very talented. The one thing I will say, they could have lower ceilings than you would like this week because the Panthers are god-awful versus the run. And the Dolphins, I think, once they build a lead, are just going to run the football. So the upside is capped for both of these guys. Unless they do their heavy damage early and often to kick off the game, then I just don't think in the third and fourth quarter we're going to see Tyreek Hill or Waddle utilized all that much. So even though they both have, wide receiver 1 upside, maybe Waddle high end wide receiver 2, just realize that the ceiling isn't that high because of the matchup this week. Then Saints at the Texans. I'll start both Chris Olave and Michael Thomas. Olave, hurt his ankle last week prior to the game. Still salvaged the day because of a touchdown. I think now, with a week having passed, it'll be a better situation. I'll start both him and Michael Thomas. And I think both of them are high-end wide receiver 2s. Texans defense doesn't scare me. I prefer Olave, definitely. Then for the Texans, Nico Collins and Robert Woods. I prefer Robert Woods over Tank Dell here. The Saints are a stingy defense. Give me the veteran wide receiver that has the experience here to beat some unique coverages as opposed to Tank Dell. Nico Collins is the number 1, but Robert Woods, I think, could be a sneaky PPR play. Won't be sexy, but, a little bit of a lesser option than Michael Thomas. Hopefully the targets are there, gets like 8-9 targets, something like that. I think that could be the case. I think it'll be a pass-heavy week just because, again, the Saints will probably stop the Texans on the ground. And the Texans, either way, have just been airing out the football much more so than focusing on running the ball. And then Tank Dell, as a result, is a sit. Moving on, Commanders at the Falcons. Only one really big name here, if you will, that I'm somewhat confident in. But if you really, really force me to say, I don't believe in either one of these quarterbacks. So Terry McLaurin kind of is boom or bust every single week. We don't know what Sam Howell version we're going to get. That is such a huge factor. But I still believe in Terry McLaurin more than any of the other Washington wide receivers, whether it's Curtis Samuel or Jahan Dotson, who, speaking of Dotson, has kind of been a bust so far this season. Again, how much is that? How much of it is just Dotson not taking the step that people expected? The Falcons don't scare me defensively, but still, I don't want to stake too many chips in the Washington offense. For the Falcons, Drake London had a good performance last week, but I continue to say it. Ritter is way too inconsistent. The Falcons prefer to run the football. Drake London, he'll have a couple of decent performances here and there, but, the Falcons are also kind of leaning on lately on Kyle Pitts, on Jonnu Smith. I just don't believe in Drake London consistently. If it was Heineke under center, it'd be a different conversation, but it's not, so I prefer to sit London. Then Colts at the Jaguars. I'll start both the top 2 wide receivers here for these teams, Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Anthony Richardson is on IR, so that means Gardner Minshew is going to be the quarterback for the Colts, and I've been saying this before when Richardson has been hurt. Minshew, I actually think, can sustain 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers on this Colts offense. That is Michael Pittman, obviously, and then Josh Downs, the rookie. So I think Downs could be a sneaky PPR addition this week. Low-end wide receiver 2. Then for the Jags, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, they're the top 2 weapons. And I think both are mid to high-end wide receiver 2s on the week. Just kind of depends on Trevor Lawrence. hopefully the Jaguars can kind of kickstart that offense and Trevor Lawrence can put up some big numbers. That's what we need for both these guys to have those really, really big games. Then Seahawks at the Bengals. For the Seahawks, I'll start DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I'm sitting Jackson Smith and Jigba. I just think, he's the odd man out right now. Maybe that'll change as the season progresses next year, but for now, it's Metcalf, it's Tyler Lockett. Lockett's going to be a boomer bust guy. Let's be honest. Metcalf high end wide receiver 2. Lockett, you're hoping for the big gains, for the big passes, some touchdown upside, but realize he is boom or bust. For the Bengals, it's Jamar Chase. He's been on fire these last 2 weeks. There's no reason why that shouldn't continue. And then I'm sitting T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Now, I will say T. Higgins didn't play last week. There was a chance he could suit up. And this is the assumption I'm operating under. I think Higgins might be on the field this week. If he isn't, then I think you can argue you can give Tyler Boyd one more start, primarily in PPR formats and standard formats. I wouldn't do it. But if Higgins is there, I think he's not at 100%. He's just going to take away targets from Tyler Boyd, so I'd rather sit both of them. If he doesn't play, you can kick the wheels on Tyler Boyd one more time. Then Vikings at the Bears. This is a big game because obviously you don't see Justin Jefferson's name here. That is because he has landed on IR, going to miss at least 4 weeks. So Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, it's going to be very, very interesting who is going to become the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver. I think a lot of people assume it'll be Jordan Addison. We'll see if that's the case, or maybe if it'll just be 2 high-end wide receiver 2s, something like that. But either way, I think both Addison and KJ Osborne, especially versus this Bears defense, this Bears secondary, are very solid starts. I prefer Addison because I like the upside more. But either way, I think both can be mid to high end wide receiver 2s. And then for the Bears, DJ Moore. Vikings defense doesn't scare me all that much either. They've had some more favorable matchups these last couple of weeks. DJ Moore has been very good. I don't think he's going to do what he did last week. Keep that in mind. But either way, DJ Moore, high end wide receiver 2 as well. Then 49ers at the Browns. I'm only looking at 1 wide receiver apiece here for both these teams. For the 49ers, Brennan Ayuk. I just think that he's proven that he's the preferred wide receiver for this 49ers offense, as opposed to Deebo Samuel when he's healthy. And for that reason, Ayuk is the start, Deebo Samuel is the sit. Ayuk kind of in that high-end wide receiver 2 category. For the Browns, I only have 1 wide receiver here, and honestly, you could argue that could be risky because Deshaun Watson might not play. So if he doesn't, Browns have a question mark at the quarterback position. They're not even sure what they're going to do, but I just think Amari Cooper then becomes that safety blanket. He's the preferred option, and he could be, even though without Deshaun Watson, still a serviceable fantasy weapon, but afterwards there's a big drop-off, so I would be sitting Elijah Moore. Then Patriots at the Raiders. Only 1 name I want to start here, that's Devontae Adams. Kind of a disappointing performance last week. Jacoby Myers was the guy that had more success, but this is my thinking. Look, the Patriots, they're very familiar with Jacoby Myers, and I think they're going to have a very good game plan to slow him down. And that's what I'm worried about here. You could argue that maybe they'll focus all their attention on Devontae Adams and say Jacoby Myers has to beat us. But I just think with how familiar they are with Myers, it's going to be tough sledding for him. We will see, however. Currently, I have him as a sit. If you're looking to find another wide receiver to start in this matchup, however, it would be him. I would not be looking at any of the New England wide receivers. I've listed all of them as sits pretty much the majority of the season. I don't see that changing here. None of those guys, similar like with the Kansas City Chiefs, or anything all that special. I don't believe in Mac Jones either. So for that reason, I'm sitting all those Patriot wide receivers. Afterwards, Lions at the Buccaneers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, you see the asterisk next to his name. If he plays, you start him. I would actually still start Josh Reynolds. I could see St. Brown being on a snap count, being somewhat limited. So I think Reynolds is the number 2 guy on this team. DeAndre Swift could also miss this game again. So some targets going Reynolds' way. I think this could be a high-scoring affair. For the Bucs, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, both have been very solid so far this year. I think you could argue both are mid to high-end wide receiver 2s. And then I would sit Khalif Raymond and Jamison Williams. I wouldn't get too cute here with the other lines wide receivers. I just don't think they're going to get enough targets. Especially with Jamison Williams, he's being brought in very, very slowly. Then Cardinals at the Rams. For the Cardinals, it's Marquise Brown. I told you guys last week, don't spend too much money on any other Cardinal wide receiver or waiver wire priorities. It's Marquise Brown. He's proven that, and I think he's a high-end wide receiver too for the rest of the season, potentially even higher depending on when Kyler Murray comes back. Then for the Rams, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both saw some really, really solid targets last week. Yes, Cooper Kupp is the number one guy now that he's back, but Puka is still in the conversation. He's a high-end wide receiver too, so you continue to play him. And then Tutu Atwell, it was nice while it lasted, but with Cooper Kupp back, he is a sit. Then Eagles at the Jets. I'm only looking at the Eagles side of things. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith can bounce back from last week. The Jets, I think they're going to be solid to begin with, and then they're just going to kind of get worn down as the game progresses. I think by the end of the game, Smith and Brown will have solid performances. Brown has the higher upside, but either way, both can be viable. For the Jets, I'm sorry, but I'm seeing Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard. This is just not a favorable matchup, and I think the Eagles are going to feast on Zach Wilson and this Jets offense. So even though Garrett Wilson might see a lot of targets, they won't be high-quality targets, so I'm sitting all the Jets wide receivers. Then Giants at the Bills. I will only start Stephon Diggs here. And look, I get it. You're saying, well, Gabe Davis is coming off a huge, huge week. How are you going to sit him? I think this is more so, again, another situation where the Bills don't have to do too much to beat the Giants if you look at it. I think that, the Giants are a team that is not that good, and you don't need to do anything all that special to beat them. So Stephon Diggs here with James Cook, with Josh Allen being able to spread the football. I don't think the Bills are going to be playing from behind. So Gabe Davis, those big, big gains, I think are going to be limited. I'd rather sit him. And then for the Giants, I'm sitting all the New York wide receivers. Simple as that. Just Daniel Jones isn't getting it done, and they don't have an alpha wide receiver on this team. Then Cowboys at the Chargers, I will start CeeDee Lamb. He's the main wide receiver that I have faith in for the Cowboys. It's just looking like Michael Gallup and Brendan Cooks have taken a step back, regressed, etc., however you want to call it. But either way, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, I think, are going to be the main guys for the Cowboys this week. Then for the Chargers, Keenan Allen has been crushing it. You start him every single week. Austin Eckler should be back, though, however, so I would temper expectations with Keenan Allen. I don't think it's going to be bonkers like it was, for a little bit of a stretch that we saw when Eckler was absent. And then Josh Palmer is the number 2 wide receiver on this team without Mike Williams. Quinn Johnston, I think, maybe could emerge to be that as the season progresses, but for now, for the short term, Palmer, I think, can be a low-end wide receiver too, similar to last year when you were starting him. But with that, we wrap up our Week 6 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in future videos.